Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm so glad you stopped by. And if you've been following along, I can't thank you enough for your continued support. Now, today's video is going to be one of those topics that you'll want to hear over and over again because it's something that impacts every single one of us, whether we realize it or not. We've all faced moments where our emotions get the best of us, right? You know, those times when someone says something rude, or a situation happens that just feels unfair. And our first instinct is to fight back, maybe lash out, say something sharp, or defend ourselves fiercely. It's totally natural. But what if I told you that the true strength in life lies in something that's not so obvious? What if I told you that the most powerful thing you can do when you're disrespected or triggered is to stay quiet and practice restraint? Sounds counterintuitive, right? But trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly why this is a game changer. It's not about being weak or letting people walk all over you, far from it. This is about being so grounded in who you are that other people's negativity simply doesn't move you. This video is all about understanding the deep, hidden power of restraint and how it can build your emotional resilience, improve your relationships, and totally transform how you handle life's challenges. But before we dive in, I got a quick ask. If you find this video helpful, please take a moment to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps me out and ensures you never miss content like this. Also, if you're loving what you're hearing and want to support the channel even more, you can always drop a super thanks below. Every little bit helps me keep making videos that can hopefully change your life for the better, just like we're going to dive into today. So let's get started. In life, one of the hardest challenges we face is remaining silent after we've been disrespected. We've all experienced that rush of heat in our bodies, that immediate impulse to fight back when someone undermines us. It's an instinct we all share, the urge to defend ourselves, to let others know they've crossed a line. But often, the strongest response in those moments is not to react, but to remain silent, to hold our ground without saying a word. This may seem counterintuitive in a world where we are encouraged to stand up for ourselves and react swiftly, but true strength, real emotional power, lies not in responding impulsively, but in choosing to stay calm, composed, and in control of our emotions. In fact, the ability to control our reactions in the face of disrespect is one of the most important skills we can develop, not just for our emotional resilience, but for our personal growth. When someone disrespects us, it can feel like an attack on our worth, our dignity. The first thing we often want to do is retaliate, to strike back in some way, whether it's with words, actions, or an attitude that shows we're not someone to be trifled with. But reacting out of emotion in those moments often does more harm than good. It puts us at risk of escalating the situation, of letting the disrespect grow into a full-blown argument or conflict. Worse, it hands over control of the situation to the person who disrespected us. They may want us to react, they may want us to get angry, frustrated, or upset because that gives them the power. When we react emotionally, we're playing into their hands, giving them control over how we feel and how we act. But when we choose to stay calm, when we refuse to react immediately, we reclaim that power. We take control of our own emotions, our own behavior, and the situation as a whole. The power of restraint is one of the most underrated strengths a person can possess. It's often mistaken for weakness, but in reality, it requires immense inner strength to resist the urge to lash out when provoked. In a world where emotions tend to take over, the ability to control one's reactions is a clear sign of deep personal growth and maturity. The ability to hold back in moments of disrespect shows that we are grounded in who we are, that we do not need external validation to affirm our worth. This doesn't mean we're ignoring the disrespect. It simply means we're choosing to take a different path, one that is guided by wisdom and foresight rather than impulsive reaction. One of the keys to this restraint is taking a step back and reflecting before reacting. In moments of disrespect, the temptation to defend ourselves, to show the other person that they've crossed a line, is often overwhelming. After all, No one likes to be belittled or treated unfairly. Our egos scream for validation, for respect, and when we feel disrespected, our first instinct is to show that we are not to be messed with. But in reacting immediately, we often lose sight of the bigger picture. We become so focused on defending our dignity in the moment that we forget that how we respond in that moment can have long-lasting consequences, not just for our own peace of mind, but for our relationships and reputations as well. By holding back, we give ourselves the time to assess the situation, to determine if a response is even necessary, and to choose the best course of action. It's crucial to recognize that not every disrespectful comment or action deserves a response. There are times when the best course of action is simply to remain silent, to show that we are unshaken by the other person's negativity. This is not a passive response. It's an active choice to prioritize our own peace of mind over the need to react emotionally. When we stay calm, we disrupt the other person's expectations. They may be looking for us to react with anger or frustration, but when we choose to stay composed, we take away their ability to manipulate our emotions. We maintain the upper hand, not through aggression, but through sheer control over ourselves. This kind of restraint doesn't come naturally to most people. For many of us, the immediate response to disrespect is emotional, whether it's anger, frustration, or hurt. But over time, we can train ourselves to pause before reacting. It's a skill that requires practice, intentionality, and self-awareness. The first step is recognizing when we're beginning to feel emotional in response to something someone has said or done. We need to be aware of the physical and mental signs of rising frustration, tightness in our chest, a racing heart, a desire to say something harsh. Once we're aware of these signs, we can take a breath, step back, and choose how to respond in a more controlled and thoughtful way. The more we practice this, the easier it becomes to maintain our composure, no matter how disrespectful the other person is. One of the greatest benefits of restraint is the way it helps to protect our mental and emotional well-being. Constantly reacting to negativity can drain our energy, leaving us in a perpetual state of defense. We can become consumed by the actions and words of others, constantly reacting to every slight or insult. But when we practice restraint, we take back control of our emotional state. We no longer let external factors dictate how we feel. Instead, we build emotional resilience. Over time, we become less susceptible to the actions and words of others. Things that once angered or upset us no longer have the same effect. We become more composed, more centered, and less reactive. This shift in mindset allows us to focus our energy on what truly matters: our goals, our relationships, our personal growth, rather than being constantly sidetracked by every minor disrespect. Restraint is also a powerful tool in social dynamics. In any social situation, people are often looking for a reaction. When someone disrespects us, they may be hoping to provoke an emotional response, to trigger us into a defensive posture. But when we stay calm, when we refuse to give them the reaction they're seeking, we disrupt their expectations. This not only leaves them uncertain, but can also be frustrating for them. They may have anticipated a certain outcome, but by not reacting, we take away their ability to manipulate us. Instead of feeding into their negativity, we maintain control over the situation. This disarms the other person, leaving them unsure of how to proceed. This level of control requires self-discipline, but it also leads to long-term benefits for our emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and manage our own emotions, as well as to understand and influence the emotions of others. By practicing restraint, we not only control our own reactions, but we also develop a deeper understanding of the emotions at play in any situation. When someone disrespects us, it's often a reflection of their own insecurities, frustrations, or pain. By staying calm, we avoid escalating the situation and, in some cases, can even respond with compassion. We may choose to respond with empathy, or at the very least, to decide not to add fuel to the fire. This ability to look beyond the surface of the interaction is a hallmark of emotional intelligence. The way we respond to disrespect can also have a significant impact on our reputation. People who are quick to anger or retaliation often develop a reputation for being difficult to deal with. In contrast, those who demonstrate restraint are often seen as strong leaders, people who can be trusted to remain calm under pressure. In both personal and professional settings, we respect those who have control over their emotions. We turn to them for guidance in difficult situations because we know they won't let their emotions dictate their decisions. The ability to stay composed in the face of adversity earns respect, not just from the person who disrespected us, but from everyone around us who witnesses our composure. In professional settings, the ability to control our reactions can be the difference between success and failure. If we react impulsively to every slight or insult, we risk damaging our professional relationships and our reputation. But when we demonstrate emotional control, we show that we are capable of handling difficult situations with grace. This doesn't mean we ignore the disrespect or let others walk all over us. It simply means that we choose the most constructive way to respond, preserving our integrity and professionalism. It's important to recognize that controlling our reactions doesn't mean we should never address disrespect. There are times when it's appropriate to assert ourselves, to set boundaries, or to stand up for our dignity. The key is knowing when and how to address it in a way that aligns with our values and long-term goals. In some cases, silence is the most powerful response. In others, a calm, assertive conversation may be necessary. But in every case, we have the power to choose how we respond. By doing so, protect our peace of mind and navigate the challenges of life with greater wisdom and maturity. It's a skill that requires effort and self-awareness, but over time, it becomes second nature. And when we practice restraint, we not only protect ourselves, we also become a source of strength and stability for others, earning respect and fostering healthier, more resilient relationships. I once worked in an office where a colleague would often belittle my contributions during meetings. This particular individual had a knack for undermining my ideas, making snide remarks about my work, and generally trying to diminish my value in the eyes of others. At first, my natural response was to defend myself, each comment stung. And my first instinct was to fight back, to assert my worth and remind everyone around me of my contributions. However, each time I reacted emotionally, I found that it only made things worse. My colleague would escalate the situation, making more pointed remarks, and the entire dynamic of the conversation would shift. Instead of focusing on the work at hand, I was now tangled in a personal conflict. The more I defended myself, the more I was drawn into this negative back and forth. It didn't take long before I realized that this was not the most productive way to handle the situation. I was constantly drained by the emotional energy it took to defend myself, and it became clear that the more I reacted, the more power I gave to my colleague. They were getting the reaction they wanted, and I was losing control. That's when I began to experiment with a different approach: restraint. I decided to stay silent when provoked. Instead of launching into a defense, I would simply take a deep breath and let the moment pass. One day, during a particularly tense meeting, my colleague made yet another remark, mocking my work. It was the same old pattern, the same slight. But this time, instead of rising to the bait, I stayed completely still. I didn't say a word. I didn't look flustered or angry. I just let the comment hang in the air, silent and unresolved. To my surprise, my colleague's mocking tone didn't have the desired effect. In fact, it seemed to unsettle them more than anything. They looked at me, expecting a response, a sign that they had succeeded in provoking me. But I remained calm, letting the silence speak for itself. As the seconds passed, I could see their confidence faltering. They were confused, unsure of how to react to my composure. Meanwhile, the room fell silent as well, the tension slowly dissipating. This moment of restraint taught me a valuable lesson that has stayed with me ever since. By choosing not to engage emotionally, I retained control of the situation. My silence didn't mean I was accepting or tolerating my colleagues' behavior. It meant that I was valuing my peace over their negativity. I was choosing not to allow their words to dictate how I felt or how I would react. It was a small but powerful act of self-discipline that shifted the balance of power in the room. Instead of letting my colleague control the narrative with their insults, I controlled it by not giving in to their provocations. And the results were striking. Not only did I maintain my dignity and peace, but I also earned the respect of my colleagues. In that moment, they witnessed my ability to remain calm and composed under pressure. They saw that I wasn't easily rattled, that I didn't need to prove my worth with words or anger. They understood that I valued the work and the group's focus more than engaging in petty conflicts. This made a lasting impression on everyone in the room, and over time, it became clear that my approach of restraint was not a sign of weakness, but one of strength. My colleague, on the other hand, was left perplexed. They had expected me to react, to get defensive, to fall into the same old pattern of confrontation. But when I didn't give them what they wanted, they were left without ammunition. They couldn't manipulate me with their insults, and that left them in a vulnerable position. The more I stayed silent, the more it became apparent that their behavior wasn't getting the reaction they craved, and it started to lose its power. Over time, my colleagues stopped targeting me in meetings. It wasn't because I had verbally confronted them or made them feel ashamed. It was because my silence had communicated a much stronger message. I wouldn't engage in their negativity, and that was a power they couldn't control. This experience reinforced for me the importance of restraint in the face of disrespect. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment, to feel like we need to defend ourselves or prove something to others. But often, the best response is no response at all, when we stay silent, rather than allowing others to pull us into their drama. By practicing restraint, we also give ourselves the opportunity to focus on what truly matters. In my case, I stopped getting distracted by my colleagues' attempts to undermine me, and I refocused on doing my work to the best of my ability. I stopped wasting energy on defending myself and started putting that energy into growing professionally and building stronger relationships with my colleagues. Over time, my reputation in the office shifted from being someone who would easily get caught up in conflict to someone who was steady, composed, and focused on the bigger picture. This shift in perception didn't happen overnight, but it gradually became clear that my approach was more effective than constantly fighting back. I also found that restraint became a powerful tool in my personal relationships. In moments of tension with friends or family, I would sometimes find myself tempted to respond with frustration or anger. But by applying the same principle of restraint, I began to see the benefits of holding back. In arguments, whether with a partner or a friend, it's often easy to say things in the heat of the moment that we don't truly mean. We lash out because we feel hurt or misunderstood, and we want to defend ourselves. But taking a step back and allowing ourselves a moment of reflection before responding can make all the difference. It prevents us from saying things that we might regret and gives us the opportunity to engage in a more thoughtful and constructive way. Over time, I realized that restraint isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about understanding them and choosing how to channel them. When we react impulsively, we allow our emotions to control us. But when we practice restraint, we take the reins of our emotional responses. We allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling, but we choose not to let those feelings dictate our actions. This kind of emotional intelligence is incredibly powerful. It allows us to navigate even the most difficult situations with composure, making decisions that align with our values and long-term goals. I also came to appreciate how restraint fosters deeper, more meaningful connections with others. In both personal and professional relationships, people are drawn to those who can stay calm and composed in the face of adversity. By choosing not to engage in petty conflicts or reactive behaviors, over time, this builds stronger, more trusting relationships, where others feel safe to be their authentic selves without fear of judgment or unnecessary drama. Another significant lesson I learned through the practice of restraint was the importance of self-respect. It became clear to me that when we choose not to react to disrespect, we are not submitting or accepting mistreatment. We are simply choosing to preserve our dignity. By not reacting to every slight or insult, we demonstrate that our self-worth is not dependent on the opinions or actions of others. This shift in mindset allows us to remain grounded in who we are, regardless of how others treat us. We stop seeking validation from external sources, and instead, we begin to find our worth from within. The power of restraint lies not just in its ability to protect us from the negative effects of disrespect, but also in its ability to help us grow. It forces us to confront our emotions, to step back and think before reacting. It teaches us to prioritize our peace of mind and our long-term goals over the immediate satisfaction of winning an argument or proving a point. Restraint is not about being passive or weak. It's about being intentional with our responses and using our emotional energy wisely. In the end, the practice of restraint has been one of the most transformative lessons of my life. It's taught me to stay grounded, to maintain my focus, and to handle conflict with grace. It's allowed me to build stronger relationships, protect my peace, and make better decisions. And perhaps most importantly, it's taught me that true strength is not in reacting to every provocation, but in choosing not to react at all. When you react emotionally to someone's disrespect or provocation, you essentially give them control over the situation. In that moment, the other person becomes the one pulling the strings, deciding how you feel and how you behave. You're no longer in the driver's seat. They are. Emotional reactions, especially those fueled by anger or frustration, make it easier for others to manipulate you and your responses. But practicing restraint, choosing not to react impulsively or emotionally, gives you back that control. Instead of getting swept up in the conflict or getting drawn into a fight, you take a step back and choose your own path. This is not about passively accepting mistreatment or ignoring disrespect. Rather, it is about maintaining your dignity and refusing to let someone else's negativity dictate how you feel or how you react. Restraint is not an act of submission. It is an act of self-preservation. It is a choice to respond with intention and self-control, to preserve your peace and mental state, rather than being emotionally hijacked. This requires a level of emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize and manage your emotions, and a deeper understanding that not every battle is worth fighting. By practicing restraint, you stop feeding into the drama that others may be trying to provoke. In doing so, you maintain your emotional integrity, and more importantly, you set boundaries around what you are willing to tolerate. This concept of emotional restraint is not just theoretical, it has real-world applications, particularly in situations where emotions run high. Take, for example, the behavior of leaders like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, who faced intense disrespect, hatred, and persecution throughout their lives. These two figures are often held up as exemplars of strength, not because they were physically imposing or outspoken in the traditional sense, but because of their ability to exercise restraint in the face of provocation. Both leaders endured immense personal suffering, including imprisonment, public vilification, and violence against their people. Yet, despite all this, neither Mandela nor Gandhi responded to their oppressors with violence or emotional outbursts. They practiced restraint, choosing to react with calm and thoughtful responses rather than with anger or vengeance. Mandela, for instance, spent 27 years in prison, much of it in harsh conditions. Yet his response to his captors was not one of bitterness or rage. Instead, he emerged from prison focused on reconciliation, not revenge. He chose to pursue peace and understanding in a country deeply divided by racial tension. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi, throughout his campaign for India's independence, faced brutal oppression from the British colonial government. Yet, Gandhi's response was to practice nonviolent resistance, even in the face of extreme physical and emotional abuse. Both men could have reacted emotionally to their circumstances. After all, they had every right to be angry. but they knew that responding emotionally would have only perpetuated the cycle of violence and hatred. Their strength lay in their ability to restrain themselves, to respond not with immediate emotional reactions, but with long-term strategies aimed at creating lasting change. What Mandela and Gandhi demonstrated was that true strength is not about reacting to every slight, insult, or attack. In fact, it is quite the opposite. True strength lies in the ability to choose how to respond to provocation, to rise above petty conflicts, and to act with grace under pressure. They understood that if they allowed the actions of their oppressors to dictate their responses, they would become trapped in the same cycle of hatred and conflict that had already caused so much pain. Instead, they chose to maintain control over their reactions, using their emotional energy not to lash out, but to focus on their greater purpose: peace, justice, and equality. The power of restraint lies in its ability to break the cycle of reaction and to offer a more constructive path forward. When someone disrespects you, they are often trying to provoke a reaction. They may want you to get angry or frustrated because that gives them a sense of control. If you immediately react with emotion, whether it's with anger, frustration, or defensiveness, you give them what they want. You allow them to dictate the terms of the interaction, and in doing so, you lose control of the situation. But when you choose to respond with restraint, you break that cycle. You stop being reactive and instead become proactive, choosing your response based on your values and what you ultimately want to achieve, rather than letting your emotions guide you in the heat of the moment. In everyday life, this kind of restraint can be incredibly powerful. Think about a workplace scenario where a colleague takes credit for your idea or undermines your work in a meeting. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself, to immediately challenge them or point out their mistake. But if you respond impulsively, you risk escalating the situation, potentially causing a bigger conflict that distracts from the work you need to accomplish. On the other hand, if you practice restraint and stay calm, you not only avoid adding fuel to the fire, but you also communicate to those around you that you are grounded and in control. By not allowing yourself to be emotionally manipulated, you maintain your integrity and preserve your focus on what really matters. In this situation, restraint doesn't mean letting your colleague get away with bad behavior. It means choosing the most effective way to address the situation, whether that means calmly asserting yourself later or finding a more constructive way to handle the issue. Restraint, in a sense, is a form of emotional mastery. It's about learning to pause before reacting, to reflect before responding. When we feel disrespected, our bodies and minds may react with anger, defensiveness, or even fear. These emotional responses are natural. They are part of our human nature. But what distinguishes a person with emotional intelligence is their ability to recognize these emotions and to control their response, rather than letting these feelings take over. This is the essence of emotional control, acknowledging your emotions without letting them dictate your actions. Another key aspect of restraint is its ability to promote peace and reduce unnecessary conflict. Many times we get into arguments or conflicts simply because we react without thinking. Someone says something that offends us, and before we know it, we're in the middle of a heated exchange that accomplishes nothing. But by practicing restraint, we give ourselves the opportunity to de-escalate the situation before it spirals out of control. We choose not to engage in pointless arguments or back-and-forth exchanges that only serve to waste time and energy. Instead, we remain calm, and we focus on finding a resolution that aligns with our long-term goals. Take the example of a parent who is dealing with a rebellious teenager. In these situations, parents often feel disrespected or challenged, especially when their children lash out or defy their authority. The natural instinct might be to respond with anger, to punish the child immediately, or to react harshly to their behavior. However, reacting impulsively in these moments can lead to further resentment and conflict, making it harder to resolve the underlying issue. On the other hand, if the parent practices restraint, they can take a step back and assess the situation with a clear mind. They might choose to listen to their child's concerns, address the root cause of the rebellion, and respond in a way that fosters understanding and growth, rather than simply reacting out of anger. By practicing restraint, we gain the ability to maintain a sense of inner peace, even in challenging circumstances. The ability to stay calm in the face of disrespect, to remain grounded even when provoked, is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is a powerful demonstration of self-control and emotional maturity. It shows that we are not easily swayed by the actions of others and that we are capable of navigating difficult situations with grace and composure. This ability to practice restraint also has long-term benefits for our emotional health. Constantly reacting to negativity or disrespect can be mentally and emotionally exhausting. It creates a perpetual state of defense, where we are constantly on guard, constantly ready to react. Over time, this wears us down and drains our energy. But when we practice restraint, we stop feeding into this cycle. We take back control of our emotional state. In doing so, we build emotional resilience. Instead of reacting impulsively to every slight, we begin to develop a more measured approach to handling challenges. We become less vulnerable to the emotional manipulation of others, and we become more focused on our own goals and values. People tend to avoid those who are quick to anger or who frequently engage in conflicts. But when we demonstrate restraint, we signal to others that we are emotionally mature and capable of handling difficult situations without becoming overwhelmed. This earns us respect and trust, both personally and professionally. People are more likely to turn to us for guidance and support because they know that we can stay calm under pressure and handle conflict with dignity. Restraint is also a form of self-respect. By choosing not to react impulsively, we communicate to others and to ourselves that we value our peace and well-being more than engaging in unnecessary conflict. We demonstrate that we do not need to prove our worth by responding to every insult or provocation. Our dignity is not defined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to respond to them. By maintaining our composure, we uphold our self-respect and set clear boundaries around how we allow others to treat us. Ultimately, the practice of restraint is a powerful tool for maintaining emotional balance and creating positive outcomes in our relationships, our work, and our personal lives. It allows us to navigate difficult situations with wisdom and composure, and it enables us to stay focused on our long-term goals without getting distracted by short-term conflicts or negative emotions. By practicing restraint, we not only protect ourselves from being manipulated by others, but we also demonstrate strength, maturity, and emotional intelligence qualities that serve us well in every area of life. When you practice restraint, you are not just avoiding a reaction in the moment, you are actively developing your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, understand, manage, and regulate our own emotions, as well as to recognize and influence the emotions of others. In a world where it's easy to get swept up by our immediate feelings, emotional intelligence acts as a stabilizing force. It helps us maintain control over our emotional responses, allowing us to make more thoughtful, deliberate decisions in both personal and professional interactions. The first step in developing emotional intelligence through restraint is becoming aware of your emotions before they spiral out of control. Often, we experience a rush of emotions, anger, frustration, hurt before we fully understand what is triggering these feelings. We might find ourselves in the midst of a heated argument, our hearts racing, and our minds clouded with thoughts of defending ourselves or proving our point. These emotions are natural. They are human reactions to perceived injustice or disrespect. However, what sets emotionally intelligent individuals apart is their ability to pause in those moments, to recognize what they are feeling, and to take a step back before reacting. Imagine a scenario in a personal relationship where you are having an argument with a loved one. The conversation escalates quickly, and suddenly, you feel a wave of anger or frustration. But if you pause and take a moment to understand why you're feeling hurt or angry, you begin to engage in a different kind of self-awareness. Instead of allowing those emotions to dictate your actions, You recognize them for what they are, temporary feelings that don't have to control you. By acknowledging your emotions, you gain the power to control them rather than being swept away by them. The key to emotional intelligence in this scenario is not just recognizing your feelings, but understanding them. You can approach the situation with a clearer perspective. This shift from reaction to response is a hallmark of emotional intelligence. Instead of being driven by impulsive feelings, you respond thoughtfully with more empathy and a deeper understanding of both your own emotions and the other person's perspective. For example, let's say you're in a disagreement with a friend who has made a comment that you find hurtful. Your immediate reaction is one of anger. Perhaps you feel disrespected or misunderstood. In that moment, you might be tempted to fire back with a sharp retort, defending yourself or calling them out. But if you practice restraint, you can pause and ask yourself why the comment hurt you. Is it because of something they said, or is it tapping into an insecurity or fear that you carry with you? Recognizing the deeper emotional layers behind your reaction gives you the ability to respond in a way that is more measured and constructive, instead of reacting in anger. This shift in how you handle conflict demonstrates emotional intelligence in action. This concept of emotional intelligence also applies in professional settings, where the stakes are often higher and the emotional dynamics are more complex. Imagine you're at work and a colleague challenges your ideas during a meeting. The impulse to defend your work can be overwhelming, especially if you feel that your contribution is being undervalued or dismissed. In this situation, it can be easy to react defensively or with frustration, especially if the colleague's comments feel disrespectful. But emotional intelligence involves the ability to pause, assess the situation, and choose how to respond thoughtfully, rather than reacting impulsively. Instead of immediately countering their criticism with more forceful arguments, you might take a deep breath, consider their perspective, and respond in a calm, measured way. By doing this, you maintain control of the situation, demonstrate professionalism, and avoid escalating the conflict. This response, driven by emotional intelligence, fosters a more productive and respectful conversation. The ability to shift from reaction to response in moments of conflict is not a trait that comes naturally to most people. In fact, or frustration are part of that defense mechanism. However, by practicing restraint, we can override these immediate impulses and choose to respond with greater emotional intelligence. This doesn't mean we suppress our emotions or ignore them. It simply means we recognize them, understand them, and use that understanding to guide our behavior in a way that serves us and others more effectively. In relationships, whether they are personal or professional, the ability to respond thoughtfully to emotional triggers can be a game changer. When you respond with emotional intelligence, you create space for deeper, more meaningful interactions. In personal relationships, you show that you value your connection with the other person more than winning an argument or proving your point. In professional relationships, you demonstrate that you're focused on collaboration and problem solving rather than being caught up in ego or defensiveness. The more you practice this skill, the more resilient you become in the face of conflict. You become less likely to react impulsively to minor irritations and more capable of handling even the most challenging interactions with grace and composure. Take, for instance, a leader or manager who is confronted with a difficult team member. The team member may be constantly late to meetings, dismissive of others' ideas, or disruptive during discussions. The emotional reaction to this behavior might be one of frustration, anger, or even resentment. It can be tempting for the leader to address the issue with a quick, emotional response, reprimanding the employee in front of the team or making a snap judgment about their work ethic. However, a leader with high emotional intelligence would pause before reacting. They would recognize their frustration, but they would also understand that reacting in the heat of the moment could damage the relationship with the employee and undermine their authority. Instead, the emotionally intelligent leader would take time to reflect on the situation, perhaps addressing the issue privately and with empathy, seeking to understand the root cause of the team member's behavior and providing constructive feedback. This measured approach not only resolves the conflict in a more positive way, but also strengthens the trust and respect between the leader and the employee. Emotional intelligence also plays a significant role in how we manage stress and anxiety. In stressful situations, our emotions can quickly become overwhelming. We may feel a surge of panic, fear, or frustration, and our immediate instinct might be to react or escape the situation. However, emotional intelligence allows us to recognize these emotions as they arise and to manage them in a way that helps us stay calm and focused. By practicing restraint, we can step back from the emotional intensity of the moment and take a more measured approach to the problem at hand. This not only reduces the negative impact of stress, but also allows us to make better decisions, to think more clearly, and to approach challenges with a level head. In developing emotional intelligence, one of the most important skills is self-awareness. Self-awareness involves being in tune with your emotions and understanding how they influence your thoughts and actions. It's about recognizing when you're being triggered by something and understanding why you're feeling the way you do. This awareness is the foundation of emotional intelligence because it allows you to manage your emotions before they take control. For example, if you feel a surge of anger rising in response to someone's comments, self-awareness helps you recognize that emotion early on, giving you the opportunity to pause and choose how to respond. Instead of reacting impulsively, you can take a step back, understand why you feel anger, and then decide the most appropriate way to handle the situation. The practice of restraint is a key aspect of emotional intelligence because it allows you to apply this self-awareness in real time. When you feel an emotional trigger, you can use that awareness to pause, assess the situation, and make a more thoughtful decision about how to react. This not only helps you stay in control of your emotions, but also enhances your ability to interact with others in a more empathetic and constructive way. In conclusion, emotional intelligence is not something we are born with. It is a skill that we can develop and strengthen over time. By practicing restraint and learning to manage our emotional reactions, we can become more self-aware, more empathetic, and more effective in our interactions with others. This shift from reacting impulsively to responding thoughtfully is at the heart of emotional intelligence, and it has the power to transform our relationships, our work, and our overall well-being. Choosing your battles is one of the most powerful lessons we can learn in life, particularly when it comes to how we respond to disrespect. It's easy to feel the need to stand up for ourselves at every moment, to react to every slight, insult, or negative comment. However, doing so can quickly lead to burnout, exhaustion, and unnecessary conflict. Disrespect, in various forms, is a part of life. It's something we all encounter at some point, whether it's in personal relationships, in the workplace, or even in casual social settings. But the key to managing these situations effectively is not to engage with every single disrespectful act. Instead, it's about knowing when to step back, when to remain silent, and when to focus on your larger goals rather than getting caught up in every minor dispute. In many situations, our natural instinct is to respond to disrespect, to defend our honor, to retaliate and prove that we are not to be disrespected. But often, this knee-jerk reaction is more harmful than helpful. Constantly reacting to every slight drains our emotional energy and can pull us off course. It shifts our focus from the things that truly matter to the small, trivial issues that don't contribute to our long-term well-being. This is why it's important to recognize that not every battle is worth fighting. For example, in a work environment, the culture can often be filled with passive-aggressive comments, subtle undermining, or even overt disrespect. A colleague may belittle your ideas, speak over you in meetings, or take credit for your work. The immediate instinct is to push back, to assert your position, to defend your ideas, to make sure everyone knows you're being treated unfairly. But constantly reacting to every perceived slight can quickly lead to burnout. It saps your energy, creates tension in the workplace, and can even escalate the conflict to the point where it becomes a constant source of stress. Instead of being constantly caught up in these battles, it's often more effective to ask yourself, If you're constantly arguing over every little thing at work, it may become difficult to focus on the bigger picture, the projects, goals, and tasks that are essential for your success. But when you choose to disengage from unnecessary conflicts, you free yourself to focus on your work, your personal growth, and your long-term objectives. This allows you to stay grounded and centered, focused on what you want to achieve, rather than getting bogged down by the negativity of those around you. In fact, sometimes silence is the most powerful tool you have when faced with disrespect or provocation. The act of remaining calm and composed without responding immediately or angrily sends a message that you are not easily swayed or rattled by petty remarks. This silence doesn't mean that you are weak or passive. Rather, it demonstrates maturity, self-respect, and emotional control. In a world where everyone seems to be looking for a reaction, choosing not to react can leave the other person perplexed, disarmed, and unsure of how to proceed. It's an incredibly powerful way of asserting your own boundaries without getting involved in unnecessary drama. One of the best examples of this is when you're dealing with a person who is intentionally trying to provoke you. Perhaps a colleague is making snide remarks during a meeting or undermining your contributions. The natural instinct is to fight back, to correct them, to defend yourself, or even to escalate the situation. But in reality, reacting in this way only feeds the negativity. When you remain silent or respond with calm assertiveness, you stop the cycle of escalation. The more you engage with someone who is provoking you, the more energy you give them, and more control they have over you. But when you refuse to engage, you take back that control. This same principle applies to personal relationships. There are moments in any relationship where conflict arises, and someone may say something hurtful, insulting, or disrespectful. Again, the instinct might be to respond emotionally, to lash out, or to demand an apology. But in doing so, you risk escalating the conflict and causing further damage. Often, it's more effective to pause, take a breath, and ask yourself if reacting in the heat of the moment is truly the best course of action. In many cases, choosing to walk away or to stay quiet can allow tempers to cool, give you time to reflect, and help you respond in a more thoughtful and constructive way. One powerful aspect of choosing your battles is understanding that you don't need to win every argument. In fact, sometimes the best way to preserve peace and protect your energy is to let go of the need to be right. This doesn't mean you accept disrespect or allow others to walk over you. It simply means that you choose not to engage in every conflict, especially when the issue at hand isn't truly important in the grand scheme of things. For example, consider a situation where a friend makes a comment that you find offensive. Instead of reacting immediately, you can ask yourself if it's worth addressing. Is this something that will matter tomorrow, next week, or in the long run? More often than not, the answer is no. Letting go of minor slights and not feeling the need to constantly defend yourself can help you maintain peace in your relationships and protect your own emotional well-being. Choosing your battles also requires self-awareness. You need to know what your emotional triggers are and be mindful of them. There will always be moments when your emotions are stirred, whether it's frustration, anger, or hurt. But by developing self-awareness, you can recognize when these emotions are starting to take over and pause before reacting. This pause allows you to make a more deliberate choice about whether it's worth engaging with the situation or whether it's better to step away and preserve your peace. The more you practice this self-awareness, the more it becomes second nature, and the easier it is to maintain control over your emotions and your responses. In situations where you decide that it's not worth engaging with a particular issue, you're not simply ignoring the problem. Instead, you're choosing to prioritize your well-being and your long-term goals over short-term conflicts. This is particularly important in professional settings. In the workplace, there will always be people who test your patience or who try to undermine your confidence. But constantly reacting to every slight will only lead to burnout and frustration. By choosing not to engage with every provocation, you can conserve your energy and direct it toward the things that really matter, like your work, your personal growth, and your relationships with people who support and respect you. Choosing your battles also fosters resilience. When you don't get dragged into every conflict, you become better at handling stress and challenges. You learn to focus on what truly matters and not let minor setbacks derail your progress. This mindset helps you become more adaptable and more focused on your goals. In personal and professional relationships, choosing when to stand firm and when to let go helps build stronger, more resilient connections. People respect those who know when to speak up and when to step back. It shows that you are grounded, self-assured. This doesn't mean giving up or avoiding confrontation when necessary. Rather, it means recognizing that some conflicts are not worth your time, energy, or emotional investment. If you're in a toxic environment, whether it's a workplace, a friendship, or a family dynamic, it may be necessary to distance yourself from the negativity. This decision to walk away, to remove yourself from situations that don't serve your well-being, is one of the most powerful ways to protect your energy and mental health. It's a choice to preserve your peace rather than engage in battles that are ultimately unproductive or harmful. There will always be moments when you feel disrespected, overlooked, or undermined. But instead of reacting impulsively, choosing your battles allows you to focus on the things that matter most. It helps you prioritize your goals and your peace of mind over the need to constantly prove yourself or engage in every conflict. By learning to step back and evaluate the situation, you can determine whether it's worth your energy or if it's better to let it go and move forward. The ability to choose your battles is a sign of emotional maturity, self-awareness, and self-respect. It empowers you to conserve your energy, focus on what truly matters, and avoid unnecessary stress and conflict. It allows you to navigate life's challenges with more grace, resilience, and purpose. In the long run, choosing your battles will not only serve you better in terms of your emotional and mental well-being, but it will also strengthen your relationships, build your reputation, and increase your overall sense of peace. By knowing when to fight and when to walk away, you can live a more balanced, centered life, where you're not constantly reacting to the negativity of others, but instead focusing on your growth, your goals, and the relationships that truly matter. When you consistently practice restraint, the benefits extend far beyond simply avoiding conflicts or maintaining a sense of composure in the moment. Over time, restraint helps you build emotional resilience, a vital skill that enables you to navigate the challenges of life with greater ease and grace. Emotional resilience is the ability to recover from setbacks, adapt to adversity, and keep moving forward despite the difficulties you encounter. By exercising restraint, you create a buffer between your emotions and your actions, which ultimately leads to greater emotional strength. In the beginning, it can feel difficult to exercise restraint, especially when provoked or disrespected. Our natural instincts push us to react quickly, to defend ourselves, or to strike back when someone insults us or challenges our views. However, when you start to make restraint a habit, you gradually find that situations which once sent you into a spiral of frustration, anger, or anxiety no longer hold the same emotional power over you. Your reactions become less impulsive, and you begin to develop the ability to pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully rather than reacting automatically. Consider a situation where someone cuts you off in traffic. In the past, you may have felt a surge of anger, cursing at the other driver, or even tailgating to express your frustration. This kind of reaction is immediate and fueled by emotion. But as you practice restraint, you start to recognize the feeling of anger rising within you. And instead of letting it control your actions, you take a deep breath and choose not to respond. Over time, this restraint becomes easier, and the initial impulse to react fades. You begin to realize that getting upset about something as insignificant as a driving infraction does nothing to improve your day or your situation. By acknowledging your feelings, but choosing not to let them dictate your behavior, you start to feel more composed, more centered, and less reactive to life's little annoyances. This process of building emotional resilience through restraint is not an overnight transformation. It requires practice, self-awareness, and a willingness to change. Initially, You may find yourself struggling to resist the urge to react in emotionally charged situations. But with time, you become more attuned to your emotions and more skilled at managing them. When you face challenges or conflicts, instead of being swept away by your feelings, you start to respond in a more balanced and measured way. You begin to see that your emotional state doesn't have to control your actions. You have the power to choose how to react, even when things don't go your way. Take, for example, a work situation where you're passed over for a promotion or left out of an important project. The initial reaction may be disappointment, frustration, or even resentment. Instead of complaining to colleagues, venting your frustration, or harboring resentment, you take a moment to reflect on the situation. You assess what you can control, what you can learn from the experience, and what actions will help you move forward. This response not only protects your emotional well-being, but also positions you as a more professional and self-aware individual in the eyes of others. Over time, consistently practicing this type of restraint can help you develop a reputation for being composed and focused, even in difficult situations. The key to this emotional maturity is the recognition that restraint is not about suppressing your emotions. Suppressing emotions can be harmful because it prevents you from fully processing and understanding them. Instead, restraint is about managing your emotions, acknowledging them, feeling them, but choosing not to let them control your actions. For instance, if you feel anger rising in response to a colleague's disrespect, you can recognize that anger and give yourself permission to feel it. But you don't have to act on it. By choosing not to react immediately, you prevent the anger from controlling your behavior in a way that could escalate the situation or lead to regretful actions. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize your emotions and understand their impact on your thoughts, decisions, and behavior. It's about being conscious of the triggers that lead to strong emotional responses and learning how to handle them in a way that serves your long-term well-being. The more self-aware you become, the easier it is to practice restraint because you're no longer at the mercy of your impulses or emotions. Instead, you're able to step back, observe what you're feeling, and choose a course of action that aligns with your values and goals. For example, imagine a situation where you're in a heated argument with a loved one. The conflict may have escalated quickly, and you can feel your anger building up. If you respond without restraint, you may say things you don't mean, and the argument could spiral out of control. However, if you practice restraint and take a moment to pause and reflect, you might realize that your anger is rooted in a deeper sense of feeling misunderstood or not heard. By acknowledging the source of your emotions and taking a step back, you can approach the situation with more empathy and understanding, which can defuse the tension and lead to a more productive conversation. This type of emotional intelligence is especially important in situations that require you to make decisions under pressure. Whether it's a business deal, a family crisis, or a personal challenge, the ability to manage your emotions and make thoughtful, measured decisions can have a significant impact on the outcome. When you practice restraint, you avoid making impulsive decisions based on fleeting emotions. Instead, you take the time to assess the situation, weigh your options, and make choices that are in line with your values and long-term goals. This ability to remain calm and composed in high-stress situations is a hallmark of emotional resilience and is something that will serve you well throughout your life. One of the most powerful long-term benefits of practicing restraint is that it helps you develop a greater sense of emotional stability. Over time, situations that once triggered intense emotional responses no longer have the same effect on you. You begin to recognize patterns in your emotions and develop strategies for managing them more effectively. As a result, you become less reactive to external events and more in control of your emotional responses. This stability enables you to navigate life's ups and downs with greater ease, and it allows you to maintain your focus on what truly matters. For example, imagine you're going through a period of significant stress at work, perhaps due to a heavy workload, difficult colleagues, or mounting deadlines. Without emotional resilience, it's easy to become overwhelmed and reactive, letting the stress affect your productivity, mood, and relationships. However, when you've developed the ability to practice restraint, you can manage your emotions more effectively. You may still feel stressed, but you are able to approach the situation with a clearer mind and a more balanced perspective. Instead of reacting impulsively, you take the time to prioritize tasks, ask for help when needed, and maintain a calm demeanor. This approach not only helps you manage the stress more effectively, but also sets a positive example for others around you. In relationships, emotional resilience and restraint can help prevent conflicts from escalating into long-term issues. When you learn to manage your emotions and practice restraint, you are better able to navigate disagreements and challenges without resorting to defensiveness or anger. This leads to healthier, more productive relationships where both parties feel heard and respected. Whether in personal or professional settings, the ability to control your emotional responses fosters trust, cooperation, and mutual respect, all of which contribute to more fulfilling interactions. The long-term benefits of restraint also extend to your overall mental and physical well-being. Constantly reacting to stress, anger, or frustration can take a toll on your health, leading to anxiety, burnout, or even physical ailments. However, by practicing restraint and managing your emotions, you reduce the negative impact that stress and negative emotions can have on your body. This not only improves your overall health, but also contributes to a more positive outlook on life. As you build emotional resilience through restraint, you become better equipped to handle whatever life throws your way, and you develop a greater sense of inner peace and confidence. Ultimately, the more you practice restraint, the more natural it becomes to maintain emotional control. With time, it becomes second nature to respond thoughtfully, to pause before reacting, and to make decisions that align with your values. This ability to manage your emotions effectively is a sign of emotional maturity, self-awareness, and resilience. It allows you to face life's challenges with a calm and centered mind, knowing that you have the strength to handle whatever comes your way without being controlled by your emotions. As you continue to build this emotional resilience, you'll find that you are not only more composed and less reactive, but also more capable of creating the life you want to live. Practicing restraint and choosing your battles wisely can be one of the most transformative decisions you make in life. It's a process that not only builds emotional resilience, but also strengthens your relationships, both personal and professional. The ability to stay calm in moments of provocation, to recognize when something is worth your energy and when it's best to let it go, is a skill that can greatly enhance your overall well-being and happiness. It's easy to get swept away by fleeting moments of anger, frustration, or hurt, especially in an era where we are constantly encouraged to react quickly and assert our rights. But learning to prioritize your peace of mind over these temporary emotional surges can be a powerful tool in achieving a more balanced, fulfilling life. One of the key benefits of practicing restraint is that it helps you conserve your emotional energy for the things that truly matter. The more we react emotionally to every slight, every criticism, or every disagreement, the more energy we waste on situations that often don't warrant our attention. Over time, constantly engaging in these emotional battles can leave us exhausted, mentally drained, and disconnected from the things that genuinely bring us joy and satisfaction. But by practicing restraint and choosing when and how to engage with negative situations, we preserve our energy for the important things in life, whether that's focusing on our careers, nurturing our relationships, or working toward personal growth. In relationships, this ability to remain calm and composed in the face of disrespect can be a game changer. Whether it's a friend, family member, colleague, or even a stranger, everyone faces moments when they are treated unfairly, belittled, or disrespected. The natural impulse in these situations is often to retaliate, to defend ourselves, to prove that we deserve respect. But this reactive behavior can lead to more conflict, more misunderstanding, and sometimes even more disrespect. When we choose to pause, breathe, and think before reacting, we not only protect ourselves, but also show others that we value our peace over petty disputes. we become less susceptible to being controlled by the actions or words of others. This sense of emotional control and stability naturally leads to healthier, more trusting relationships. Take a personal example. Imagine being in a heated argument with a close friend. They say something that feels hurtful or dismissive, and your first instinct is to respond defensively, maybe even with a biting remark of your own. It's easy to get caught up in the emotional heat of the moment. But the true test of emotional maturity is in choosing not to react impulsively. If, instead of responding in anger, you take a deep breath, pause, and reflect on the situation, you might recognize that their comment came from their own frustrations or insecurities. By not feeding into the negativity, you create the space to address the issue calmly and effectively, allowing for a resolution that strengthens the relationship rather than damaging it. This doesn't mean ignoring the disrespect. It means choosing to respond in a way that is aligned with your values and your long-term goals for the relationship. This same principle applies in professional settings, where choosing your battles wisely can significantly impact your career and reputation. Workplaces can often be rife with passive-aggressive behavior, gossip, and unintentional slights. For example, a colleague might take credit for your work, or a superior might dismiss your ideas without consideration. In these moments, the temptation is often to respond immediately to defend yourself, or to set the record straight. But by doing so, you risk escalating the situation, creating unnecessary tension, and possibly damaging your professional relationships. Instead, practicing restraint allows you to take a step back, assess the situation, and determine if it's worth engaging. Often, the best response is to remain calm, focus on your objectives, and preserve your emotional energy for tasks that will truly advance your goals. If the situation calls for addressing the issue later, doing so with a composed and thoughtful approach will usually be more effective than reacting impulsively in the heat of the moment. In both personal and professional settings, restraint often involves choosing to walk away from situations that do not serve you or your goals. This doesn't mean avoiding conflict altogether or letting people walk all over you. Rather, it's about recognizing when an issue is simply not worth your emotional investment. There are moments when silence or walking away is the most powerful response you can offer. For instance, in a disagreement with a colleague or a family member, it's not always necessary to have the last word or prove your point. Sometimes, the best decision is to walk away and revisit the situation when both parties have had time to cool down. In doing so, you avoid escalating the conflict and give yourself the space to reflect on the issue from a more balanced perspective. This ability to control your emotional reactions is a sign of self-respect. It shows that you value yourself enough to choose your battles carefully and not let others dictate your emotional state. It's easy to get caught up in the need for validation or to feel the pressure to defend ourselves at every turn. But true self-respect lies in the ability to remain grounded in who you are, regardless of how others treat you. When you learn to pause and breathe before reacting, you reinforce the idea that your emotions and energy are not for others to control. You choose to direct your attention to things that align with your values, whether that's personal growth, achieving your goals, or maintaining peace in your relationships. In many ways, emotional control and restraint can be thought of as the foundation of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as the emotions of others, can greatly improve our decision-making, communication, and conflict resolution skills. The more we practice restraint, the more we develop our emotional intelligence, and the more effective we become in our interactions with others. We learn to understand our emotional triggers, to recognize when we are being provoked, and to manage our responses in a way that preserves our peace and aligns with our values. This level of self-awareness and control can lead to greater personal growth and success in all areas of life. For instance, someone who practices restraint in the face of conflict demonstrates a high level of emotional intelligence. They recognize the emotional charge of a situation, take a moment to process their feelings and respond with intention rather than impulsivity. In doing so, they are able to avoid unnecessary escalation, defuse potential conflicts, and maintain their integrity. Over time, this practice becomes a habit, and the ability to manage emotions effectively becomes second nature. Rather than reacting to life's challenges with frustration, anger, or anxiety, they approach situations with a calm and measured response that reflects their maturity and emotional resilience. There's also a long-term benefit to practicing restraint in terms of personal peace. In a world where we are constantly bombarded by external stimuli, whether it's the stress of daily life, the demands of work, or the negativity of social media, choosing to stay calm and composed can be incredibly grounding. When you stop reacting to every little annoyance or provocation, you give yourself the opportunity to preserve your inner peace. You stop letting external forces control your mood or emotional state, and instead, you reclaim your sense of calm. This sense of peace allows you to approach life with a clearer mind, more focus, and greater joy. Ultimately, the power of emotional control and self-respect lies in the ability to align your actions with your values and long-term goals, rather than being driven by temporary emotional reactions. When you choose to remain calm, to think before you speak or act, you demonstrate that you're not easily swayed by others. You show that your peace is more important than being right or proving a point. This is the true power of emotional control. It gives you the ability to navigate life's challenges with grace, to build stronger relationships, and to maintain your focus on the things that truly matter. So, the next time you're faced with disrespect or provocation, remember to pause, breathe, and choose a response that aligns with your values. By doing so, you will preserve your energy, protect your peace, and set yourself up for long-term success and fulfillment. Restraint is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness, but in reality, it is a demonstration of immense strength. The ability to hold back, to resist the urge to react impulsively or emotionally, requires far more internal power than simply giving in to our natural responses. In life, we are frequently faced with situations that stir up powerful emotions: frustration, anger, hurt, or resentment. The instinctual reaction is often to lash out, to defend ourselves, or to stand our ground, thinking that we need to react in order to be respected. However, restraint is not about suppressing these emotions or pretending they don't exist. It is about managing them in a way that preserves your peace and keeps you grounded. In a world where so much emphasis is placed on being outspoken, asserting oneself, and standing up for one's rights, restraint offers a different, more profound approach. The quiet strength of restraint lies in the ability to pause, to take a breath, and to choose how to respond in a way that aligns with your values and long-term goals. It is about recognizing that not every insult or provocation requires a response, and not every battle is worth fighting. When you choose to exercise restraint, you take control of your emotional state and avoid being swept away by the tide of immediate reactions. One of the most significant benefits of practicing restraint is the protection it offers to your emotional well-being. By choosing not to engage in every emotional flare-up or respond to every slight, you conserve your energy for the things that matter most. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and waste emotional energy on things that ultimately do not contribute to your long-term happiness or success. Whether it's an argument with a friend, a rude comment from a colleague, or an unjust situation in your personal life, reacting impulsively can drain your mental and emotional reserves. But when you practice restraint, you make a conscious decision not to allow external events or other people's behavior to control your emotional state. Instead of letting frustration, anger, or hurt define your actions, you maintain control over how you respond. This control allows you to maintain your peace and focus on things that add value to your life, rather than getting bogged down by fleeting emotions. The importance of emotional intelligence in this process cannot be overstated. Emotional intelligence, or the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions, plays a crucial role in developing restraint. When you can identify the emotional triggers that arise within you, you are better equipped to manage your responses in a healthy, constructive manner. Emotional intelligence allows you to step back from a situation, evaluate your feelings, and choose how to act in a way that reflects your values and goals, rather than being driven solely by emotion. It's easy to fall into the trap of reacting automatically to things that bother us. Consider a situation at work where a colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The initial impulse might be to defend yourself immediately, to point out that the idea was yours, and to set the record straight. However, responding in the heat of the moment might escalate the situation and create unnecessary tension. Instead, by exercising restraint, you can take a step back, gather your thoughts, and choose a more thoughtful response. Maybe you wait until after the meeting to address the issue privately with your colleague, or raise the matter in a way that is professional and constructive. In doing so, you not only protect your peace, but also demonstrate emotional maturity and the ability to handle conflict with grace. Restraint is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending that everything is okay when it's not. It's about choosing to acknowledge your emotions without allowing them to control your actions. It's about finding the strength to pause and think before reacting impulsively. When you learn to manage your emotional responses, you gain the ability to approach challenging situations with a calm, measured demeanor. This doesn't mean you avoid addressing problems, but rather that you approach them with a level-headed perspective that is not clouded by unchecked emotions. One of the most significant advantages of practicing restraint over time is that it helps you build resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to cope with challenges without being knocked off course. The more you practice restraint, the more resilient you become. By learning to handle emotional triggers with poise and self-control, you build the mental and emotional strength to withstand life's ups and downs without losing your composure. Resilience allows you to stay grounded in the face of adversity, knowing that you have the ability to respond thoughtfully and not be swept away by the immediate emotional tide. For example, in a personal relationship, there may be moments of tension or conflict. Someone might say something hurtful, or a situation might arise where you feel disrespected. The natural reaction might be to retaliate or defend yourself in a way that only escalates the situation. However, when you practice restraint, you're able to pause and consider the bigger picture. You might recognize that your partner's comment came from a place of stress or frustration, not personal malice. By choosing to respond with empathy and understanding, rather than defensiveness, you can address the issue without letting it spiral into a larger conflict. This ability to respond with emotional intelligence, instead of reacting emotionally, not only strengthens your relationship, but also helps build trust and mutual respect. This shift from reaction to response can be especially important in high-stakes situations, such as when you're facing a crisis or a particularly difficult decision. During times of stress or pressure, it's easy to fall into the trap of reacting impulsively, making snap decisions that are driven by emotion. However, practicing restraint in these moments allows you to approach the situation with clarity and composure. You can make decisions that are thoughtful, strategic, and aligned with your long-term goals, rather than letting fear, anxiety, or frustration drive your choices. One of the most significant long-term benefits of practicing restraint is that it contributes to a greater sense of emotional control and personal empowerment. When you consistently choose to remain calm and composed in the face of provocation, you begin to take ownership of your emotional responses. You no longer allow external events or other people's actions to dictate how you feel or how you behave. This sense of emotional autonomy gives you greater control over your life and decisions, and it allows you to move through the world with confidence and purpose. In addition to enhancing your emotional resilience, practicing restraint also improves the quality of your relationships. People are naturally drawn to those who are composed, who can handle difficult situations without reacting with anger or frustration, whether in personal or professional settings. The ability to stay calm in challenging circumstances signals maturity and emotional intelligence, and a strong sense of self. Over time, this builds trust and respect from others, as they see you as someone who is not easily swayed by external circumstances. This, in turn, strengthens your relationships and helps foster more positive, productive interactions. It is also important to remember that restraint does not mean avoidance. Choosing your battles wisely means you are selective about when and how to engage, not that you avoid conflict altogether. There will be times when standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, or confronting a problem head-on is necessary. Restraint does not mean letting others walk all over you. Rather, it means you have the wisdom and emotional control to decide the best course of action in each situation. This balanced approach leads to healthier, more respectful relationships where your peace of mind is not at the mercy of others' behavior. In conclusion, practicing restraint is not about weakness or passivity, it's about strength, emotional intelligence, and self-respect. It's about choosing to maintain control in situations where the natural response might be to react impulsively or emotionally. By practicing restraint, you protect your peace, build resilience, and strengthen your relationships. Remember, not every insult requires a response, and not every battle needs to be fought. By choosing wisely, you'll discover the true power of emotional control, and you'll find that the quiet strength of restraint can have a profound impact on your life, helping you navigate challenges with grace. Preserve your mental energy for what truly matters, and cultivate healthier, more fulfilling relationships. All right, so we've talked about how practicing restraint can be a powerful tool in your personal growth, how it not only protects your peace, but also builds emotional intelligence, helps you become more resilient, and strengthens your relationships. It's about choosing your battles wisely and realizing that not every fight, not every insult, and not every situation needs your immediate reaction. The truth is, the more you practice restraint, the less power other people's words or actions have over you. You start to realize that you don't have to react to every provocation because the only thing that matters is how you choose to handle yourself. And guess what? The more you do this, the easier it becomes. The strength to stay calm and composed in the face of adversity becomes a habit, and you'll begin to see that things that used to upset you simply don't have the same emotional pull anymore. You'll find that your life starts to get smoother, your relationships improve, and you grow as a person in ways you never thought possible. I hope you found this video as eye-opening as I did while researching and reflecting on it. But before we wrap up, let me remind you again, if this video helped you or made you think about how you handle your emotions, please hit that like button, share this with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means everything to me, and it ensures that we keep this conversation going. And as always, if you'd like to show some extra love, please consider using the super thanks button below. Your donations help me keep bringing valuable content like this and improve the quality of the videos. Thank you so much for your support, seriously. It's appreciated more than you know. Remember, you have the power to choose your responses. Don't let life's challenges dictate your peace. Stay grounded, stay calm, and let your emotional strength be your greatest asset. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.